Hello and welcome to Bottomline. India, as we all know, has a huge infrastructure deficit. One of the companies that's helping fight that deficit is Hindustan Construction Company. The problem we know is that many companies who are trying to solve the problem also end up fighting the system itself, not just fighting the problem. So joining me today is Ajit Gulabchand, Chairman of Hindustan Construction, and we'll try and understand what are the problems that plague this sector, particularly as we begin 2013 on a seemingly more optimistic note, on one. And second, with the budget coming around the corner, can some of these issues be addressed by the union budget, at least to get things center staged, if not actually acted upon? Mr. Gulabchand, thank you very much for joining us. You know, 2012 and perhaps 11 has been terrible years for the infrastructure sector as a whole, and perhaps for you. I mean, if one looks at the outcome not achieved. Are these times that you regret having got into this sector with such depth as you perhaps did?
You don't get into a sector of this kind to regret for 1 year that makes it go bad. The whole objective is that there are problems confronted by this sector which have yet not been resolved, and therefore we are going to see problems in this sector for a while. You can see that even the next plan talks of $1 trillion expenditure on infrastructure. That shows the heart, mind, everything seems to be in the right place. Then what has gone wrong? What has gone wrong is several things. And while there are several, we can sum them up in 2 or 3. I'll begin with Environment Ministry being one of the reasons for the problems that we face. About 900 projects amounting to 5 lakh crores of rupees worth of investment have been stalled by the Environment Ministry. And they continue to remain stalled. They include projects like Vedanta, projects like POSCO, several projects like that.
But could it be argued that in many of those cases, the projects did not have complete approvals and went ahead with in-principle approvals?
That's a very easy statement to make. The Environment Ministry itself does not have objective and measurable norms. Neither does it have a very transparent and clear method of giving clearances. Many of these projects have been stalled post-clearances. So fundamentally what we have here is a system that's not transparent, is extremely arbitrary, and does not have objective and measurable norms. As a result, at each one of these projects is cleared on a case-by-case basis. As a result, who's going to untangle this? If I want to get an environment clearance, if I meet these standards, I should be in a position to be assured that I will get it. The discussion should come where the standards required may be slightly higher than what industry can meet, or the standards required then can be either diluted or more time be given to meet the standards. But you make it a participative affair so that we embed environment in every process of our industry, whether it's a service industry, manufacturing, or agricultural processing. This is not there. So you may say all these things, and you know, like the word law will take its course, you can say, oh, there's approvals, blah, blah. Why is it so? Why is it so? Is it because the processes were bad? They were not transparent, they were confused, they were arbitrary?
I think that's the answer as well.
So that's the point. So I think we need to take a fresh look at this and say, no, we must have a clear policy. And we must have a very clearly laid down norms, which is a very difficult job. But not so difficult that it can't be done, but it's more tedious. It means consultations with experts, consultations with industry, deciding what are our goals, where do we want to go, or should we just go at it, hammer and tong, and block everything, stop everything. That has created a lot of fears. And
so that's the first part, as you said, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. The second part out of this is these recent scams that became high profile in many ways, as well as the courts, not just the courts, but the Comptroller and Auditor General, as well as the Vigilance Commissioner, all entering the fray, have created an atmosphere that creates a lot of fear in decision making. And therefore we have now a widely used term called decision paralysis. And that actually exists. Because of this, simple decision making is avoided, and therefore they want every issue is rejected. Nobody wants to take a decision. On payment decisions, disputes are raised because these are natural in infrastructure. Delays due to environmental or any other that take place, they create into a dispute. And as a result, about 1,30,000 crores is owed to the infrastructure industry, just the construction part of it. As a result, a whole lot of monies are locked up, and the bankers are not being paid because they have finally funded this. There's some kind of ridiculous notion amongst government that the developers and the contractors that operate, it is their money. It isn't their money. So what you have, and when you have cost overruns and you have other blockages that run into cost overruns of 30 and 40% of the value of the project, it's all funded by the banks. And the banks are funded by ordinary people. So what are we doing by not paying on time, by not resolving issues on time? And when I raised this issue, I was told that, oh, these are all claims and disputes, so how can we talk? I said, I can understand if they were part of a normal distribution of events, that some are claims, some are solved, some are decided, some are in courts. No, every claim of every contractor, in every contract, in every department of government is challenged, all the way up to the Supreme Court. What does that tell you? Does it tell you of a functioning system?
Any example that you can quote from your own experience in the recent past?
Yeah, take National Highway Authority. You have every decision of the engineer to grant a certain, solve a dispute is challenged. It goes to a dispute resolution board. It is challenged. Then it goes to an arbitration. It is challenged. Even the courts tend to entertain something which they shouldn't be entertaining, because the Arbitration Act is very clear that unless there's a mala fide shown, you should not accept it in courts, because it's an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. There's a case in which a misprint or a missing page in a contract of 13 contractors for concession companies was missing. It was very clear that this was not the intended objective, that it was an error. And as a result of which, the NHI refused to give them escalations. And they continued to challenge them in each of the cases. Now, here is something a board should be able to sit and say, because if it was different, they're peculiarly different from every other contract that is approved by the board of NHI. Then why you can't clear this such an obvious error? Not only that, each case is taken. Then it was said that if one of the cases is won in the High Court, would you then correct everything? To which the legal advice by the Attorney General of India was, no, each case is separate and must be fought all the way. Now you tell me, what is this? Is this governance? Is this administration? And therefore, you got all this piling up. And the interest on it is piling up. And then the amounts become larger and larger. The banks are not being paid. All the infrastructure companies are coming into financial stringency. All the infrastructure loans are being restructured.
So HCC, for instance, has about 2,000 crores owing.
About 3,000 crores.
It's now 3,000, okay.
Yeah. So we have gone in for the CDR system because that's a more organized way of doing it. But the fact is, why should this happen? This is all as a result, as we saw these amounts mounting from the government not paying you. And to resolve this is a process. Now, anywhere else in the world, these things do go to dispute resolution, get resolved within 3 months. Even the arbitration cases of toughest nature do take not more than 18 months. But here, arbitration by the time it's complete, everything is a 7-year process. With each dispute resolving body, whether it's a court or this, having its own say in it. And they are continuously challenged. So I think this fear, psychosis that is there needs to be broken down. that there is ultimately the objective is to create the infrastructure. Everybody involved in creating that is not a
Right.
crook, and that it is being done in the best interest. There are costs involved, and there are real costs. You can examine that very quickly, and you can examine that should it take years to do that? It can be done very quickly. As we saw in the case of fast-track courts, that it is possible to do it very quickly. Take in South Africa, that Blade Runner's case. We just barely heard that this has happened. It's already in the courts, and the courts are deciding whether there's a prima facie case or not.
So let's
this is possible.
Right.
So,
let's take a break on this, and I'll come back and ask you about what we can do now. I think now you've outlined the
just
3 or 4 issues.
One more area.
There's one more issue, but we'll come back and continue. You're watching Bottom Line. Welcome back to Bottom Line. Can we fix India's infrastructure problems? Still with me, Ajit Gulabchand, Chairman of Hindustan Construction Company. Mr. Gulabchand, I think you were outlining the 3 or 4 key areas responsible for the slowdown, if not almost stoppage of construction and development in the infrastructure space. I think you talked about 3 points. You said you had one more point which highlights the problem.
One more point is our procurement processes. Infrastructure is something that the country builds, and you procure services for making that happen. Those are fairly antiquated, and they need considerable improvement, both in terms of the legal structure they are in, as well as in the kind of process of governing their implementation. In many cases, simple construction contract itself is a little more transparent, more clear, and has been practiced. Whereas when you come to some of the newer areas like telecom and etc., mining leases, prospecting licenses, I think they remain antiquated and still too discretionary, not enough transparency, not enough clarity in what happens, and even what gets drafted is drafted so vaguely. So I think procurement practices need to improve considerably.
Sure. So now how can we fix this?
Well, now, until you fix all this, nothing's going to happen. That is for sure.
Yeah, but there are 1 or 2 key roadblocks, as in.
So we need to understand how do we fix this. Now, one of the good news is, I think, right from the Prime Minister, his own secretariat, principal secretary, etc., his own economic advisory council, the finance minister, the whole team of the finance minister, a variety of bankers who are now facing the crunch of this whole situation of indecisiveness, all have been seized of the problem, that the problem is serious, it needs addressing. Then the next important thing is that they need to start sorting out a more objective and measurable way to sort out your environment clearances. I think they must set up a good commission which will come up with an idea. Then second is necessary to decentralize. Everything need not go to the central government. Delhi can't handle all this and cannot handle. It's too large a country. There has to be decentralization.
So let me ask you a sort of counter question. So Lavasa, I mean, we are at the backdrop. I mean, from your point of view, I know you've argued that this is really about sustainable development, building new urban centers.
Correct.
It sounds perfect on paper, but yet you don't have too many fans who believe you. And is there a larger problem here?
I don't have too many fans who believe me is a statement you are making. I do not accept that there are not enough people that appreciate this.
No, the only reason I ask is, Lavasa is not a shut case as yet, isn't it?
No, absolutely.
Oh, is it?
As far as Environment Ministry, the state government, according to the then law, accepted that this was the environment and gave the environment clearance after proper environment impacts assessment and studies. The central government, based on one gate, which is a toll gate-like thing or an entrance gate being about 1,000 feet, wanted it to come to them. Based on this, they stopped the work. We took them to court. The court admitted our petition, that there is merit to our case. After that, we got into discussion with the Environment Ministry, with the minister, and who then said, all right, the only way to solve it is you apply to us again. Without admitting any guilt or anything, we we applied to him. He then has given clearance for the first phase of the project. So it is not now cleared, it is twice cleared. Okay? So that clearance is on. The Lavasa project is on its way, it's going on.
Right. So it was, let's say if it was a more of a balance sheet question, how much time would you spend on building dams, roads, ports versus...
When you create a corporation, you're not the only one who's spending the time. You know,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you have to create structures that will be devoted and dedicated with proper chief executives to the cause for which they are being built for or they are being created for. So Lavasa will pursue its destination Lavasa, plus it has an intellectual...
Or similar projects.
Or similar projects. And HCC will pursue its construction pursuit and doing that.
And you see both as having equal potential in this economy,
I see both as an equal potential, both have a great future, both in this economy have. Now, how do you get the economy going? That's not my task. That's the task of the government of India. And I think it's important that the government of India, which is now seized of the problem, they've already started talking. Whether it is making ease of investment possible, making infrastructure construction easy to build, entrepreneurs make it more predictable so they will invest, so they find the money to invest. It should be a predictable atmosphere, a more credible policy, a more uncertain policy, which what breeds all this. So creating all that is important. The building capacity is important.
In some ways, you've also given us a sort of budget prescription. I mean, at least
so this is what it is about. Yeah. Now, will the government address these issues? While yes, there is immediate poverty and you need a soup kitchen policy also, which is fine. But must we abandon proper reforms just for this? Can they not both coexist? It is possible for both to coexist. So if we focus on creation of wealth, then the distribution is a little more easy. What we need to do that. We are now therefore looking forward that having understood, and the same people that have understood are the same people that created the new policies that brought this prosperity about in the last 15, 20 years. So I feel that we are in good hands. We may not have done some things we should have in the last 8 years, but we now are focused on it. And what we want is this ease of doing business. So that, and therefore, it calls for all that is required. So if it's a fiscal deficit that needs to be addressed, so the investors around the world feel more certain and more confident about the future of India, or the rating agencies feel more comfortable about it, or whether it is reducing the current account balance so that your rupee looks better and the rupee is stronger.
Mr. Gulabchand, we're running out of time. So let me ask you one last question. I think I wanted a budget prescription from you, but you've given a 360-degree sort of, I guess, approach to that. Have you forgiven those who caused the delays in the projects that you've been involved with in some ways? And have you sort of moved on?
I'm not in the business of forgiving anybody. Here is a national asset that was being created. Each one has to assess whether he has helped the national asset to happen or whether he has made this national asset unduly more expensive, cost jobs. It is for each one to decide. It is not for me to forgive or not to forgive. But the more important part is that we wish that the people in charge of governing India will have the right wisdom to create a policy that will usher in prosperity into India faster than later.
Mr. Gulabchand, thank you so much for joining us. Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of Bottom Line. Thanks for watching. See you next week, same time.